All right, guys, what's going on? Welcome back to the Everything College Football Podcast. Today, me and Nick here will be breaking down Notre Dame versus North Carolina State. Looking at the spread, 7 in favor of the Irish. Total is at 50.5, 12 p.m. Eastern time on ABC. Carter Finley Stadium in Raleigh. Looking at the Notre Dame offense, everyone was obviously interested to see the Tommy Rees departure matched with Sam Hartman showing up, and he's been very efficient. 82.5% completion percentage so far through 2 games. Obviously, competition's been very bad. What was it, Tennessee State or something like that this past Saturday, and of course the season opener against Navy. But he's looked comfortable. Obviously, he had a missed pass early in that Navy game off play action. He's clearly wasn't very comfortable in that. But 4 touchdowns each in both games. He's starting to get a groove going in this offense, and I think certainly regardless of the competition, it's important to find rhythm and groove here in a new scheme. And again, I think when he continues to get better off play action, he could be really dangerous here for Notre Dame. Hartman's been phenomenal. Look at his weapons, of course. Jaden Greathouse was a guy who caught a pair of touchdowns in the season opener. He's got 98 yards on the season. Jaden Thomas, 125 as well. Mitchell Evans trying to replace Michael Mayer there at the tight end position. Chris Tyree's gotten a handful of receptions. So we've been by committee here. Deion Colsey, Jadarian Price as well. So this is a mix and match receiving core, Nick. We came into the year, we didn't really know who's going to step up. All these guys we talked about, though, so we're not, shocked to see Greathouse have a couple of touchdowns already or Thomas be the leading pass catcher by any means. Tobias Merriweather, though, we expected him to be a great asset for this offense. 2 receptions for 5 yards. He's been completely absent. Who do you think is going to emerge in this game against a very good Wolfpack secondary? And how do you think Hartman will do in his first real test, one that also comes on the road against a familiar foe?
Certainly it's disappointing that Merriweather has not really been involved. Hartman's very impressive so far. I know against limited opposition, but I've been very impressed with what I've seen of him. 33 attempts, 32 completions out of 40 attempts, 82.5% completion percentage, 45 yards, and 6 touchdowns for him, a 225 passer rating. Very good numbers from Sam Hartman. I'm very impressed. And we wondered what the fit would be like in this offense when you plugged in a quarterback that had some turnover issues and was, questionable at times during his time at Wake Forest, but obviously he was known to air it out and put up a ton of yards, so we knew the yards are going to be a lot with Hartman. I've been very impressed so far. I'm very excited to see how this offense continues to improve with Hartman at the helm. I think they have some nice talents. Jaden Thomas has been that guy to step up 125 yards receiving over 2 games, 15.6 yards per catch, and a score for him. Greathouse has 2 scores and nearly 100 yards receiving as well. Michael Evans involved. Chris Tyree's been involved as well. They spread the ball out. A lot of these guys have different catch numbers. They've also run the ball a little bit here and there. So they've certainly found a way with Drew Esteem, leading the way with 211 yards around 7.3 yards per carry and 2 scores for him. I like the balance of this offense so far. I've been very impressed with this Notre Dame offense. They've been putting up some nice stats so far early on. They've been getting after the ball, putting up a ton of points, again, against token opposition. But overall, I'm very happy. This offensive line looks pretty good so far. They're going to face a tough pass rush, though, here with NC State.
32 rushing attempts against Navy, 33 against Tennessee State this past week. So they're keeping these backs fresh. Audric Estime, 211 yards, 2 touchdowns. He's been great. He's a phenomenal fit for this scheme. He's obviously going to be the bell cow for them as the season goes on. Jeremiah Love, Brian Payne, that is, Jadarian Price. They're trying to get all these backs involved. Again, they want to kind of keep them fresh, but they have, these guys that were freshmen getting involved with the veteran. So this is an interesting running game. The offensive line, first big test for them. 0 sacks allowed this season. And I don't expect them to really give up a sack in this one either, with Joe Wall leading the way. Zeke Correll, a guy who's been around a long time, a big fan of his at center. He's been phenomenal this year so far. Tosh Baker, he's gotten involved a bit as well. Guys like Ashton Craig as well. So the guys that, back these players up, the starters are very good. I think they're certainly going to figure out the rest of this offensive line. Fisher, Correll, all those guys are all penciled in starters, and we'll kind of see what happens with the rest of the unit as the season goes on. But I think these guys are going to have a great game. There's good size here. There's nice physicality. This is a nice power run game. And they have a guy in Hartman, again, who's really getting comfortable in play action from under center. I think this is going to be a very good year for this offense. Again, we'll see how they do, but I expect another balanced approach. I think Hartman will continue to be efficient. But one thing that has yet to happen to him that's been a constant in his career is turnovers, Nick. It's something we've talked about the last couple seasons going into each year is how many turnovers he has. No picks yet this season, but now as we uptick in competition, we might potentially see that, and that certainly cost him problems throughout his career.
You certainly wonder when the turnover shoe is going to drop. It will eventually drop at some point. Hartman will turn the ball over. It's just going to come with that. He makes poor mistakes on some occasions. I really hope he doesn't, but we're expecting it, right? And against a better defense here, a pretty good secondary in NC State, they could certainly find a way to get a pick or two and change this game around. I've been impressed with the offense. Joe Alt's been really dominant on the offensive line. They've had a pretty good unit overall. Let's see what type of balance they have against this NC State. UConn had a lot of success running the ball against NC State. Will Notre Dame try to run the ball and move the ball on the ground and try and beat up what was a pretty weak run defense against UConn? I think it's a very interesting wild card to look at.
Looking at the NC State offense, Robert and I reuniting with Brendan Armstrong and the former Virginia transfer, and he looks somewhat like his old self in the opener against UConn. Only had 155 passing, but the biggest news for him was 96 yards rushing, 2 touchdowns, 19 attempts. That was something, many years back at Virginia, he was able to exploit defenses. This is a guy who has good speed, very versatile runner. Always impressed with that. Really hasn't showcased his running skills over the last couple of seasons, though. Armstrong, I think he's starting to regain his confidence a little bit. Biggest problem for NC State, though, is they don't have guys who really emerged at wide receiver. Expected Porter Rooks, Keon Lassane, Terrell Timmons, one of those guys that really get involved in this past week. None of them did. Those guys combined for 5 receptions. 22 yards by Lassane was the most. Kevin Conception, 4 grabs, 36 yards. Then Michael Allen at running back was right behind him in terms of receptions and yards. That's kind of concerning against the UConn defense. They were pretty sound against the pass last year, but they don't seem to have much vertical speed at all. And I think that's something we have talked about in the past of NC State, is they don't have anyone that can really stretch the field. And going against a Marcus Freeman team that loves to play man coverage, they're going to get in your face and be physical. That's a big concern, Nick, because if these guys get locked down, there's going to be no passing attack here for NC State one bit.
I agree. Certainly need to find a way to use this passing attack. If this running back room struggles, it's going to be, poor, certainly, for this NC State offense. I think Armstrong looks good, locked in. Again, 65.4% completion percentage against UConn. No touchdowns through the air. They were good on the ground. Brendan Armstrong had 2 rushing touchdowns, 100 yards, nearly 100 yards on the ground for him, 5.1 yards per carry. They also spread the ball out. Houston got some touches. Delbert Mims got some touches. Michael Allen some touches as well. He had 3 catches as well for 27 yards. I like the spread balance here. Can we see Armstrong fully unleash his potential? We know that he's a very good pocket passer. The wide receiving group has disappointed so far. Can someone step up and be that one guy that gets all the targets from Armstrong?
They only had 364 yards against UConn, only 24 points. But this is an exciting unit to watch because I know they certainly have some talent, and their receiving core is going to explode. And the running game, it was fun to see them finally get going. Last year, they only had 2 games of 200-plus yards. One was against an FCS opponent, so really they only had 1. The other was against Boston College. They already had that totally eclipsed early on in the season. Jordan Houston, 57 yards rushing on 13 carries. He was able to be efficient. So was Michael Allen, 7.5 yards per carry for him on his 4 touches. This is completely different than last year. They've just run completely downhill. They wouldn't go anywhere because the offensive line was just awful. So the running game last year was just, flat out poor for NC State. Seeing them run outside zone, in shotgun, handing the ball off, Armstrong on keepers. Very exciting, Nick. I think there's some good potential here with this NC State offense. If they can be just somewhat efficient running the ball, then certainly is going to allow this passing attack to open up. It's going to be a tough challenge, though, again, against Notre Dame. But I certainly think that Robert and I is going to have something up his sleeve to try and get these guys in the open field to make some plays.
It certainly was interesting balance. Like you said, they had different sort of looks from this offense that we didn't really expect at NC State. I do like the balance they had on the ground. 200 yards on the ground against UConn, 209 to be exact. It's a very nice number for this offense. They were able to spread the ball and run the ball and efficiently do that. I think Armstrong will continue to look better as a pocket passer. I want to see more throws out of him. 17 or 26 total attempts. I want to see that number certainly get a little bit higher here against this Notre Dame secondary that can be a little iffy at time. They need to find somebody to step up wide receiver. They really haven't had anyone step up. Julian Gray could step up. Porter Rooks would be the guy in the slot that I want to see potentially step up. Rooks, we didn't see a lot out of him. He only has 2 grabs so far this season. Get a guy like him step up, be involved against this Notre Dame secondary that does have a little question marks and has not really been tested the air. Obviously, Navy with the triple option is not going to test them at all. And Tennessee State's, a bit of a joke opposition. Will this secondary face some troubles against a team that can certainly pass it here with NC State?
Anthony Belton, Anthony Carter anchor that left side. They're pretty impressive in week 1. We'll see if that continues. Belton, he's massive, like 6'5", 330, something along that nature, very big. Final thoughts to the NC State offense, Nick. They're at home, of course, got a very tough, tall task ahead of them. I certainly think the opportunity is there for them to be a lot better than they were against UConn. I think this is certainly going to be work in progress as the year goes on, though. I certainly think this run game will probably disappoint them more often than not, especially if Armstrong starts to get bottled up. Just the lack of vertical speed here is really going to be a killer in this game. Big mismatch.
I agree. There is a total lack of vertical speed. It's certainly a problem for this team. They have to find a way to get that throughout the season. They won't have any success in the ACC, which is going to be a tough conference this year.
Looking at the Notre Dame defense, like you said, they haven't played anybody yet, so we really don't know what we're going to see from this defense. But one thing that's really stood out is the linebacking group. Jack Kaiser, J.D. Bertrand, these guys were great against the triple option, showcasing their speed. Maris Lafu, this is a guy we talked about battling for his job coming into the season. He's been phenomenal. 10 tackles for him, has a forced fumble as well. Very strong start to the season for him and this veteran linebacking core. the defensive line. This is going to be an interesting test. The offensive line for NC State certainly last year had more struggles than not. And I think this might be another opportunity for them to certainly exploit a bit of a mismatch. Jason Onoi, Howard Cross, Riley Mills. This is a veteran defensive line that has been able to showcase good penetration. I remember that first drive against Navy, they weren't very good. After that, though, they were phenomenal. 48 attempts, held them to 126 yards to do that against the triple option. That is very impressive, Nick. They did not seem feared one bit the remainder of that contest. Tennessee State, they didn't allow anything either. This run defense, I don't think it's a bad unit for them one bit. They obviously had some issues last year against Navy, and that was about it. No one really exposed this run defense. I think they were sound throughout the year, and I think they're going to continue to ride the momentum here, especially with a linebacking core that seems to be improved, which is crazy to say considering how old and veteran, Jesus Christ. Considering how many veterans they have in that part of the defense, I think Notre Dame here is really trying to make a statement up front.
Some people said that Navy could be competitive and potentially cover the spread, which is about 20.5 points, because they had the triple option offense that did torch Notre Dame's run defense last year. But we didn't see that in week 0. Notre Dame stood strong and they defended against triple option. They were very good against the run. They really showed themselves as they could potentially be involved and be better against the run this year. Maris Leafu looked great over the first 2 games, 10 total tackles, a forced fumble for him. He's really having a good start to his season. As a graduate senior, we were hoping he'd finally hit that high level that we expected out of him. Another graduate senior, Howard Cross, he has 10 total tackles and a pass breakup. He's looked really good there. In the middle at nose tackle, he's a good, big, beefy nose tackle that can be moved around and be involved in that. Riley Mills as well has been pretty solid so far early on. He has 4 total tackles plus a sack. So the numbers are pretty good out of this defense. They have been productive so far. They really stuff that Navy triple option, which is very scary to play against if you're not ready for it. They can suddenly hit you in a couple different ways with that offense. I think they stood that test very strong and survived against it.
Some new faces in Joshua Burnham, Javante Jean-Baptiste have also been good. 10 tackles for loss for this defense so far this year. So I think they're really starting to establish some quality depth there on the defensive line. This will be a big opportunity for them. And again, you talk about that mismatch with the receiving core, not having much speed. They're going to have to win the physicality battle. NC State is out wide if they want this passing attack to have a chance. Benjamin Morrison, phenomenal ball skills last year. He had an absurd amount of interceptions. Cam Hart on the other side. Certainly, we want to see how the safety group will do. DJ Brown, Xavier Watts, Thomas Harper. They've not been tested one bit. Obviously, again, they played the triple option. They played an FCS opponent last year. They've knocked off some of the cobwebs. Most teams in college football, that's what they did, over the week 0 and week 1. This Notre Dame secondary, though, the cobwebs are still there, Nick. I think that's something that might actually play into NC State's favor. I think they should try to attack them early, get these safeties on their heels, get these guys a little concerned. I think that's probably going to be their best chance because the cobwebs, I think that's a big factor for me here.
I certainly agree. I think that if it is going to be a successful route for this NC State offense, they're going to have to attack the secondary early. Like I said, a secondary that's kind of weak and has not really been tested at all playing against token opposition. I am a little concerned about this Xavier Watts. He's probably the best guy on this team in terms of the secondary at strong safety. I like him a whole lot. He's looked good. 6 total tackles for him and a pass breakup during his appearances. Cam Hart as well as a leader on this team. Hart, though, only 3 tackles. He did have a tackle for loss, limited number of chances for those guys. This defense does kind of concern me in certain situations. I think this is the first test. They could face some trouble here with this passing attack, that if they get comfortable and these wide receivers find a burst of speed, they could challenge it. But this NC State doesn't really have that speed for me right now. It's going to be a very interesting matchup. You want to look at something to highlight on the early slate. How will this defense secondary especially fare against this NC State passing attack?
Most of the guys in the secondary, they've only played about 30 snaps each a game. They're not being tested either. So this is going to be something that's going to be big to watch. We'll see what happens after that game. I'm not going to be too worried about it, but there's going to be plenty of teaching tape here. So I certainly think the NC State passing attack will do better, at least early on, than expected. I definitely think they'll playing man coverage, playing physical press. That's certainly something that's going to benefit them long-term in this ball game. Look at the NC State defense. The run defense was uncharacteristically not very good against UConn. They allowed a big rush late in that game. It was like a 70-yard touchdown or something like that. They ended up giving up over 6 yards per carry. NC State only defended the run 26 times, though UConn kind of abandoned the run at times. And they certainly stuffed it as well, so that number might be a little bit skewed, concerned I had a 70-yarder. But there was a handful of times where UConn was able to get to the edge and pick up a solid amount of yards on first and second down. That's something that you certainly don't want to see, especially against Notre Dame, because they're absolutely going to eat you alive if that is the case. Peyton Wilson, though, one of the nation's best players, should be a first-team All-American this year. 10 tackles, an interception, a TFL, a pass breakup. He did it all in the opener against UConn, Nick. This is certainly a team that is underperformed for us at times when we pick them to do good, but one thing that stands true is the run defense is typically stout. This front 6 as well is very good. Davin Vann at defensive tackle level, what he's able to bring. Him and Zeke Corral in the middle. It's going to be a fun matchup to watch all game. Devon Betty, a linebacker we expect to be better this season for them. plenty of stuff we're going to learn about NC State this year. We certainly think it's still a very, stout team in terms of up front and at linebacker. Big task here, though. If they can't slow down the run, it's going to be a long day. How do you think their chances are, though, in doing that? Because this is what they build their program off, is being physical against the run. And if they can't do that, though, they don't really have much of an identity on this side of the ball.
Certainly a huge test for a physical defense here that's good against the run. Peyton Wilson has been fantastic so far. Really great leader for this team. I mean, he's just been absolutely dominant so far with 10 total tackles, tackle for loss, interception, and a pass breakup. Very good in that one game for him. Devin Van has also looked solid as well early on. He's a talented piece that they have on this defense on the left defensive edge. He gets after the quarterback. He looks so good in the backfield. He does sack against UConn. This is a good unit. I think there is some nice front seven here. They are good against the run. They did look a little weak against UConn. UConn was kind of weird that UConn abandoned the run. I think UConn should have probably stuck to running the ball a little bit more. They could have potentially won that game up there in Stores. Overall, though, I think this is a unit that's good. They're going to find a way to be tested here. They're going to try and use good balance to defend against this run. Devon Beatty as well. He's going to have to be involved early on. He had 4 total tackles. I like this North Carolina State defensive unit. Certainly, there is some solid players here.
I certainly expect C.J. Clark to be better on the interior as well. He's a big specimen for them. The secondary, this is a team that typically doesn't allow major completion percentage. We're talking about Notre Dame maybe having an edge in the secondary. I think the same thing could be said here for the Wolfpack against this receiving corps. It's still a very young one. They're still trying to piece everything together. You got a true freshman coming in there, being your leading touchdown getter so far against a veteran secondary. Aiden White, one of the nation's top corners. You got Shaheen Battle as well. He's very phenomenal on the other side. Devon Boykin, a veteran safety. This is a secondary that's always played very good. You never ever see NC State get torn apart. The opponent completion rating is typically very low. Coming into last year, they were first in 2021, 57% last season. So they don't give up many completions, Nick. And Sam Hartman's been highly efficient this year. So who do you think's going to have the edge at the end of the day in terms of efficiency through the air on this side of the ball?
I think Notre Dame is going to win this game because they are going to be able to beat this secondary that has some question marks. Devon Boykin, he's the guy that you want to look towards as strong safety. He's a very talented player. Looked okay against UConn, 3 tackles for him. Not an incredible night, but he wasn't really tested a whole lot as well either. Jakeem Harris, another guy at free safety, want to see more out of him. He didn't really have any opportunities to show. He did have 1 tackle for loss, though. I think Notre Dame is going to win this game by beating them through the air and attacking a secondary group that is really solid, but just has not been tested yet. This is a young wide receiving corps, but they do have a veteran single caller in Sam Hartman there under center. I think that is going to be the key here. I think they are going to dominate against this passing defense that is not incredible for NC State, but it's not bad by any stretch of the imagination. I just think that there is a nice advantage there with the wide receiving corps that Notre Dame has.
Yeah, it reminds me a couple years ago, they actually played North Carolina State. I remember saying NC State would win that game, and Wake Forest ended up doing so, but Hartman was awful. Completed like 40% of his passes, 3 picks. He just looked terrible that day. I know one of his receivers had like 20 targets because he just kept trying to throw it to him because he had no other options. So he's faced these boys before. Tony Gibson knows how to get after him. I definitely think that's something to key in on here. Tail of the tape, looking at the team comparisons, I think Hartman's clearly the better quarterback than Armstrong, who's looking to still get back into that former groove. Running back, clear edge for the Irish. I think wide receiver is pretty even. Maybe that's debatable. I don't know. I don't think it's that big of a deal anyways. Offensive line, Irish certainly have much more power up front. Guys like Joe Alt, Blake Fisher, Zeke Correll, love them much more than Anthony Belton and Anthony Carter. Defensive line, I think NC State's going to get the edge there, which I think I might want to reverse that and go to Notre Dame because they've certainly had some of these younger guys, some newer cats get involved that have certainly been able to make an impact. And they also have more veterans than NC State as well. So maybe that's something I'm going to flip-flop on. Linebacker Peyton Wilson's great. That trio for the Irish, they've also looked pretty strong this season, and in the past they've also been highly impactful. And then the secondary for NC State, we'll just go ahead and give that 2 games underway for Notre Dame, and they have not been tested at all. So I think by default NC State will get that, even though it is a very good secondary at the end of the day. I think this is a pretty evenly contested matchup, Nick. Where's the biggest edge?
I think these teams are both very even. I think certainly quarterback and running back, you want to give the balance or the advantage to Notre Dame, who have a very talented signal caller, and Sam Hartman, who's very confident, looks good so far. The running back room is also very balanced. I like the attack here for Notre Dame. It's a very balanced matchup, though. These teams are very even on defense as well, especially, linebackers very even, defensive lines even as well. Secondary, we really haven't seen anything out of Notre Dame yet, so we don't know entirely what to expect out of them. It's a very balanced matchup on paper and tough on the road for Notre Dame to go into an atmosphere like that.
Final thoughts in the prediction, keys to the game for Notre Dame. Sam Hartman's continued rhythm and then containing Armstrong's legs. NC State must be better versus the run and figure something out in the passing game. I think this is going to be a very sloppy game. I think that the secondary is certainly going to limit some of that efficiency. I definitely think they're going to contain Brandon Armstrong's legs also. I think NC State's also going to be better against the run, and I don't think they're going to figure out anything in the passing game, Nick. It's just, this is a fun game to break down because there's so many mysteries and fun matchups here. Notre Dame's going to win, though. I think NC State will cover 27-20 for me. I'll take the under in this one all day, though. I think, again, it's going to be a very sloppy contest. We're going to learn a lot about the Irish here in the first big test with Ohio State looming in a couple weeks.
This is certainly a sloppy matchup. I have Notre Dame winning 35-20. I think there will be a close game early on with the Irish pulling away late, covering the spread 7 points total, and hitting the over as well. I like both these teams. I think they're both teams that have shown us a little bit something early on. Notre Dame's this is their first real test after playing two, smaller opponents in Navy and Tennessee State here. Hartman, can continue to find that rhythm and be comfortable in the pocket. I think that's the big key here. Spread the ball out, use a lot of his different weapons, get different guys involved who have not been involved early on. Find nice balance with the running game as well. I think NC State got to be better versus the run. I think Notre Dame can certainly pick them apart. I think Notre Dame's going to win this game. It's a very interesting matchup in week 2, though. One of the better games on the slate and a very nice balance for these two teams early on to get a nice test against each other.
If Hartman, folds and throws a couple interceptions or maybe fumbles a ball or something, that could easily give the Wolfpack the victory in this one, Nick. I don't want to be Notre Dame trying to play from behind with this young receiving core. I definitely don't think the NC State pass rush is too fearful, but that secondary certainly scares me trying to play from behind here on the road. I think that's one thing we should also mention.
Certainly, I think Notre Dame has to take the lead early and jump on this team as they play from behind in a tough atmosphere at Carter Finley Stadium. It would be very difficult for them to catch up.
It's going to be it for today's episode, guys. As always, Nick, I appreciate you joining me. Interesting crossover game here by teams that should be in the same conference.
Absolutely, a very interesting matchup early on.
Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.